Good day, everybody. Zack here with RevZilla, and welcome to another episode of Daily Rider. Our guest today is the Harley-Davidson Nightster. Very basically, that is a 1000cc V-twin tucked into a seemingly simple cruiser chassis for sale for $12,000 American dollars. Now, the Harley-Davidson Sportster model line is one of the most famous and storied in all of motorcycling, and it's got a reputation for being stone simple. However, this Nightster here, which is new as of a couple years ago, is part of a new breed of Harley Sportster that is much more modern and complex. You might be looking at this bike and thinking, come on, Zach, what's so sophisticated and interesting about the cheapest Harley-Davidson that you can buy today? Well, more than you might think. And either way, we've got a lot to talk about on the ride to work today. Ready to go? Let's ride! Alrighty, everybody. Harley-Davidson Nightster. Before we get going here, a quick reminder that this episode is brought to you by RevZilla. RevZilla is an e-commerce company, not just a YouTube channel. We sell parts and accessories for motorcycles and people who love them. And some of the money that RevZilla makes by selling jackets and helmets and saddlebags and tires to motorcycle enthusiasts goes into making content like this. So the next time you find yourself enjoying Daily Rider or the Shop Manual or the High Side Low Side podcast or CTXP Adventures, we just ask that you keep it in mind next time you need something for you or your motorcycle. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Okie dokie, Harley-Davidson Nightster. I feel like I promised a lot. I feel like I promised that it was going to be a very interesting episode, so I'll do my best here. Right off the bat, I guess I could apologize for getting this bike completely filthy, riding it in the rain. It's got to be done sometimes, and sometimes rain testing can be good. We will start with the engine, which is the easily the most sort of impressive and sophisticated piece of the Nightster. It is a 975cc V-twin. It is part of the Revolution Max family. You can see here on the little air cleaner. So it is related to the engine that is in the Pan America, but it is smaller due to smaller pistons and bore and a shorter stroke in the cylinder. It's got variable valve timing on the intake cams. It has a counterbalancer in the crankcase and another counterbalancer in the forward head. It's liquid cooled. It has hydraulic valve actuation, which means there are no valve adjustments that need to happen ever. It also has all sorts of little nifty stuff like sort of complicated crank journals, and it has these sort of like vanes and pieces of plastic inside the airbox that help keep the intake noise down. It is a fully state-of-the-art engine, and on the outside things aren't quite as they seem either. For example, this gas tank is not a gas tank. Actually, it's an airbox cover. The gas tank is under the seat over here. And also these covers on the engine are actually magnesium. So it's not actually the cylinder that we're seeing here, which magnesium is sort of a, I don't know, semi-exotic material, usually used on fancy European bikes, I guess. It is a very sophisticated and modern engine, considering this is ultimately a fairly basic motorcycle in Harley-Davidson's lineup. So we'll talk about how it all works together later on. While we're still by the side of the bike, though, I do want to point out that these magnesium covers, you might be thinking, I don't know, like how much does it actually change how the bike looks? Well, look at the other side of the engine. You can see it's completely different. This is what the cylinders actually look like, these sort of like nifty steampunk castings. I mean, I think they look cool. Not that the other side of the bike doesn't look good, but I kind of like this raw side. That being said, this side of the bike is quite a bit less attractive to look at, being the non-pipe, non-kickstand side of the bike, or non-kickstand showing side of the bike. You can see a lot of wires kind of down here, and the radiator fan's pretty obvious, and there's more wires kind of halfway tucked behind this cowl, and there's big chunks of hardware and welds that you can see that are not quite hidden behind this little plastic cover. It's a little messy, especially from Harley-Davidson, which is a company that is historically quite good at packaging things and making things look smooth. So I think that's notable for what it's worth. Oh, and actually, while we were on that side of the bike, I meant to point out the braking system, which is on the left side here. Brembo caliper, steel braided line that sticks out at this sort of jaunty angle, which I think is interesting, which I'm pretty sure is on purpose because when the fork turns, it needs room to flex. But it does look a little odd when it's sitting here like this. Single disc, which we'll talk about braking performance later, of course. LED lighting. And yeah, aside from that, the chassis is fairly basic when you look at it in terms of what it gets done. It's just holding the engine, but it is also a little bit more complicated than that. The engine is also a stressed member in the chassis, so the front frame comes down here and connects to the engine, which is sort of part of the frame, and then the swing arm bolts to the back of the engine. It's not the first time this has happened, but it is an interesting step for Harley-Davidson to take anyway. Okay, well, I think I've babbled along long enough of talking about all little whiz-bangs and doodads and pieces of technology. So let's get on this sucker and start riding, shall we? Pretty simple little dash Mahoozit here, as you can see. And we'll fire up this engine about which I have already talked so much. Sound like a 60-degree V-twin? Well, it is. Not a 45, which most Harley-Davidson, of course, old, outgoing Sportsters have always been. All right. Coolio. Fully ride-by-wire, and it's a little weird when it's cold sometimes, because the idle's a little higher when it's cold, which is pretty typical. But also it has like an anti-rev feature where when you spin the throttle all the way back, it doesn't actually rev up. Interesting, right? I think the Pan Am has that too, but anywho, once it warms up, it's usually a little more predictable. Let's do it. First thing I want to talk about is the price, actually, which if you bought a Nightster in 2023, you would have paid probably $13,500 because that's what MSRP was. For 2024, the MSRP has gone down to $12,000, $11,999, and the Nightster Special, which is a sort of upgraded version of this bike, is now $13,500. So there's a price adjustment between 23 and 24, which I mentioned in part because this is being filmed in January of 24, which might cause some confusion about what the heck I'm talking about when it comes to pricing. For what it's worth, that Nightster Special, for the extra $1,500, you get the fancier dash from the Sportster S, which is TFT and has like Google Map turn-by-turn connectivity and stuff like that. You get a slightly different handlebar, different wheels, a little bikini fairing, and some different color options, and what else, Zach? You get a passenger seat. So yeah, anyway, that's what the Nightster Special is. But I wanted the base bike because I don't know, maybe I'm a basic boy when it comes down to it. As for the rest of the specs, the horsepower figures, I think around 95 claimed horsepower and maybe 70 claimed foot-pounds of torque, which is sort of neither high nor low, but pretty spunky engine, which we'll learn about as we ride it more. Seat height is 27.5 inches, very low seat height. You won't find a lot of other motorcycles with variable valve timing in the better part of 100 horsepower with 27-inch seat height. So that's something, I guess. And last of all, that gas tank under the seat that I pointed out holds 3.1 gallons of fuel, and when it is full on the Daily Rider scales, the Nightster was 483 pounds. That's fairly light for a Harley cruiser, and just goes to show the sophistication and sort of pretty sizable step forward that the Nightster takes for the Sportster line. As for how the Nightster feels to sit on and ride, it's basically a carbon copy of the outgoing Harley 48, which is a 1200 Sportster. It's sort of the outgoing Sportster model, and I think that's in large part a good thing, because the Harley Sportster line historically has had a lot of fans, and I always liked the 48. I don't think it's objectively comfortable. It puts you in the sort of classic American V-twin scofflaw slouch, as I call it, but it is, as far as I can tell, exactly what people want, and it's comfortable enough to feel like you're in command of the bike, and of course nice low seat height, and the foot pegs aren't crazy far forward, which I appreciate. I actually occasionally find myself scooting forward on the seat. Like if I scoot way up to just the back of what would be the gas tank, the very, very front of the seat, I kind of like that riding position. It reminds me a little bit more of like a Triumph Bobber or something like that. It's a little bit more conventional. Feels like your feet are, a little farther back and you're closer to the handlebar. It's slightly more compact, but also there's more leg room because as you slide forward on the seat, you go up. So I do that from time to time, but I probably look weird when I'm doing it. And also anytime you twist the loud stick on this sucker, you slide back into the pocket of the seat pretty fast because it's got some get up and go. Now the route on the freeway at cruising speed, we can talk about what this sucker's like on the highway, and it's very enigmatic. It's a very, I've got a love-hate relationship with it. Things that I don't like are few but strong, if that makes any sense. The riding position I don't like, and I don't think it's very good for this type of riding. You just kind of like sit up in the wind and there's nothing you can really do, and your feet are a little too far forward, and if the road is bumpy at all, then your spine is going to get sick of 3 inches of rear suspension travel, and you can't move around on the seat very much, and it's just not really designed for doing this kind of thing. Plus it only holds 3 gallons of gas, so you're not going to go very far anyway, which is a little bit weird that the bike is largely uncomfortable, in my opinion, to sit on in situations like this, because some of what it does is so good. Like the gearbox, for example, the gear spacing is just perfect, in my opinion. I find myself not even needing 6th gear sometimes. The engine's so smooth, and when I do shift to 6, the engine is still smooth, but the revs drop down to an even more kind of mellow pace. It just works terrifically well, and the fact that the engine is so smooth almost defies Harley-Davidsonism in general. I don't want to say it's too smooth, it's just way smoother and more refined than I was expecting for this bike. So from that standpoint, or all of those standpoints, I suppose, the bike is terrific at this kind of travel. The engine is so excellent. There's lots of roll-on power, or there's plenty anyway, and it just feels so upper crust. It's a great engine for doing this kind of thing. It's just not a good motorcycle for doing this kind of thing. So yeah, actual fuel range not going to be super good because 3-gallon tank, like I said, and I don't remember what my average fuel numbers were. 40 something maybe. I'll put them on screen. I think there's a gallon reserve because the fuel light comes on pretty early with usually about 40 or so miles of range, and that means the fuel light coming on at 75, 80, 85 miles, which is kind of startling. I mean, it depends on what your commute is or how far you ride typically, but anytime a fuel light comes on at less than 100 miles, that's always a little bit surprising to me. Which, again, a little bit enigmatic. You know, like you can't go very far on a tank of gas, and yet the engine is so buttery smooth, and the mirrors are good, and it's an interesting blend of things that are good and things that are not as good. Okie dokie, into town for the round town challenge. Let's see how many footless stops we can get on the Nightster. Nice low center of gravity, you gotta give it that, and it's not even particularly heavy for what it is. Oop, fudge that one up. In spite of, in my opinion, some things that are a little bit weird about interacting with this bike at low speed. Like the clutch is, it's fine. I don't want to make a federal case about the clutch feel. It's fine. It's just it's a little grabbier than I want it to be, and not quite as communicative. And the throttle mapping, sort of like the on-off throttle control is pretty good as far as like smooth pickup. It's easy to pick the throttle up smoothly, which is not the case with many bikes these days. But I find the ride-by-wire a little strange. Whoops. It's sort of sometimes it feels like you twist the throttle a lot and you don't get very much, and other times it feels like it hits a little harder, especially in the rain mode. It's like really takes some getting used to. It's not a huge deal, but it is definitely a sort of quirkier bike to use, especially at low speed, than I think Harley-Davidsons of yore have been, which have been sort of maybe agricultural but very predictable and linear. I don't want to forget to talk about the transmission, which I also think is a little numb. It's quite modern in so much as the throws of the shifter are pretty short, and I don't know that I've missed a shift, so it's not that it's unruly or difficult. I just often find myself, especially if I have thicker waterproof boots on, which I've been using lately, I go from 2nd to 3rd gear and I kind of think, well, it moved, so I guess I'm in the next gear, but it's not super positive there. It's not like using transmissions on certain other bikes that are just like really crisp and clear. Like when you miss a shift, you're like, I knew exactly what happened because I could feel it in my foot. That is not this transmission. It's a little hard to complain that it's bad. I just wish that it was a little more communicative, in part because it feels like that's the kind of thing Harley-Davidson cares about. All right, on to Lover's Lane, where we normally talk about passenger accommodations, and it will be a short discussion today because the Nightster, this base model anyway, does not have a passenger seat. And so I would like to talk about ride modes one more time, since we have time in this section here. And I just complained sort of about rain mode being kind of awkward because it changes the way the throttle feels so much. And I'd like to make a distinction, because the thing I don't like about the throttle feel on the Nightster is that I feel like it feels disconnected from the throttle itself. Sometimes it can feel a little synthetic, which is something that any good ride-by-wire system is trying to avoid, right? It wants to feel just like throttle cables would, but be electronic. The thing I will say that I like about rain mode and road mode and sport mode is that they do feel very different on this bike, and that's something that is worth noting, because there are a lot of motorcycles where you try the different modes. Sometimes there's 3 modes, sometimes there's 6, and you're like, is it even changing? Is this different at all? Which really annoys me. I don't like that. And so I appreciate that the Nightster, when you change modes, the attitude of the bike changes. I do just wish that the connection that I felt between my right wrist and the rear tire was a little bit more clear. Right into the twisty road section on the Nightster, and this is a place where you wouldn't necessarily expect a Harley-Davidson cruiser to excel, and I don't think it does. In the grand scheme of motorcycling, it's not an ultra sporty motorcycle to ride through roads like this, or curves like this, I should say. But in the context of Harley-Davidsons and cruisers in general, it works pretty well. It's good. It's got nice balance. Engineers at Harley-Davidson clearly know how to make a motorcycle go through corners. They're just, to a certain extent, fighting with one hand behind their back, considering the bikes are often low and wide. Practically, what you'll find, I think, is that it doesn't drag its foot pegs leaving gas stations or going through intersections in the city normally. And even cruising along at this speed, like I haven't touched the peg yet, but if you wick up the pace just a little bit, there you go, now the peg's on the ground. It offers enough kind of sporting ability, I think, to be entertaining, especially for newer or intermediate riders. But if a true sport bike is what you want, then obviously you're not going to be barking up the Nightster tree, I don't think. I think in general, for what it's worth, the suspension feels pretty good. I find the sort of over gentle bumps, it does its best to soak up all the roughness of the road. Like I said, the rear suspension travel is only about 3 inches, so it's doesn't offer a whole lot of travel, which is always going to hamstring a bike's comfort a little bit. And the fork, I don't have a lot of complaints about. I will say both the front and rear, I feel like when you hit sharp bumps like potholes or something like that, I do feel like there's a fairly severe jolt that gets sent through your body, which again I think is a product in part of the bike being low to the ground. Okie dokie, we got a red light coming up here. We can talk about brakes. Let's do it. Only a single disc up there, as I said, and yeah, it's fairly easy to get into the ABS, which in my mind suggests, whoops, didn't find neutral there, Zach, you can do better than that, suggests there's plenty of brake up there. It is, you know, almost 500-pound bike, and it's only got one rotor up there, but it's enough in my opinion, and it's good componentry. It's Brembo caliper and steel braided lines and adjustable levers. I don't know, it's got all the things that you would expect a $12,000 bike to have, in my opinion. But yeah, I talked about this with the Honda Shadow as well, which also only has one disc up front, and people said, it doesn't seem like enough. But because of the, you know, the weight bias of this bike, you're going to want to use the rear brake a lot when you ride a bike that has a lot of weight on the rear tire. So really, front braking system only needs to be so sharp in order to get the job done. Alrighty, and away we go. So this is the part of the ride where we sometimes talk about, would you buy the bike just for the engine? And it's such an interesting question with this bike, because the engine to me is both the best part of this bike and the part that is the most at odds with what this bike is supposed to be, I think, right? The sort of like base Sportster in Harley-Davidson lineup in my mind is always the bike that's like evocative and simple and basic in all the right ways and sort of like smells like hot oil when you shut it off. And because this bike doesn't have those qualities, it almost feels wrong. But objectively, the engine is just terrific. I think it's great. I think there are a lot of bikes in the world from Europe, Japan, or anywhere else, whatever, that would be proud to have this amount of power and kind of like depth and dynamism and refinement. It's just so interesting that the Harley Nightster is the one that is delivering on all that. Well, we haven't talked about the dash this whole time because we haven't had a stoplight to do it, but we can basically do it while we're rolling, to be honest. It's a fairly simple unit, obviously. Like I said, if you get the Nightster Special, you get the updated dash that's on the Sportster S. This is just a, very simple speedo needle that goes around the top there, and then at the bottom here you got this little LCD screen that has trip meters, which you can cycle through here, as well as a digital readout of RPM, a clock, odometer, stuff like that. One thing I like about the dash very much, and the controls in general, is that it's all very intuitive and kind of basic in the best way possible. Like the toggle that you use to cycle through all the information, if you just hold it down, it resets the trip meter, easy enough. The ride modes are adjustable on the fly, so you just sort of tap the button. I'm in sport mode now, and I'm feeling sporty. Last thing is when you're stopped, which I will be shortly here, if you hold down this TC button here, a TC light comes on the dash and the traction control's off. No like menus and settings and bike and ride mode and and now I have traction control off. It's a simple machine and it delivers from a user interface standpoint as well, which I appreciate. All right, time to go. Sport mode TC off. Haze the tire, kiddos. Look out. Yeah, in sport mode it's a little rowdy, I gotta say. It's a little bit rowdy. Anyway, let's go to rain mode, which automatically puts traction control back on, I should say. And we can experiment with rain mode in this last little stretch of pavement before the dirt road shortcut. And I can see if I stand by what I said about the throttle response being dull. Yeah, it is dull. It's dull, but different. Which, thank goodness. That it's not just the same ride mode 3 times with a different logo on the dash. I appreciate that. Okay, time for the dirt road shortcut, which will start in rain mode, because rain mode, road mode, and sport all have different parameters for traction control, because there's no traction control settings, I believe. Oh, goodness gracious. There's a lake. Here we got all this rain. Oh, Zachary, what did you get yourself into? Well, I had to clean the bike anyway, so off we go. Rain mode, wide open. That was a pretty good acceleration there. Oh, God, oh, God. Oh, I think there might be a train coming, too. I gotta get out of here. Oh, God. Pretty good acceleration in rain mode there, so I'm gonna go over to road mode. We're gonna experiment with that. I'm gonna try not to get too wet or fall down, because I really don't want to do either one of those things. Oh, jeez. I'll be honest, I'm a little bit impressed with the Nightster. Okay, here we go. Road mode traction control. Wide open. A little bit rowdier than rain mode. Now this is sport. Let's see what happens here. Whoa! Even with TC on, you can get pretty swayzy. That's pretty good. I like that. I just would never expect that from this bike. I would never expect it. It's unexpected. I'm gonna turn traction control off now. But that was fun. Unexpectedly so. All right, here we go. Back onto the black top where the Nightster is most comfortable. And do we think we can get a wheelie out of it? I don't know, let's try. Whoa, whoa. I wasn't expecting that. Another thing I wasn't expecting. I thought it was going to spin the tire. But there you go. a Nightster wheelie. You're full of little surprises, Nightster. Full of little surprises. All right, so backing it into corners is all about loading up the front end and then getting the rear tire to slide gently. So it's not going to be very good on this bike. You can get a little back in if you want, but as soon as you're on the back brake, it really slows down quickly because of all that weight bias I was talking about earlier. We'll give it one more try here. Wrap. Down to first. Oh, I got kicked out of the seat. Okay, we got a little one there. Not great for backing it in on account of the anti-lock braking system. But yeah, definitely more fun. Definitely rowdier and more fun than I would have expected looking at the brochure. Okie doke, U-turn challenge. Look at that. We got 3 big, plump, juicy parking spaces to take a bite out of on this U-turn challenge. We're not going to need all 3. No way. Although the Nightster is a little bit wide on account of those bar end mirrors. Oops, I screwed up. I'm just going to put my foot down and we're going to go full lock left, feet up. Hit. Okay. You know, 2.1, 2.2 maybe. That's sort of neither here nor there. But maybe a little better than I was expecting. Pretty mild-mannered at low speed, like I said. Okay, everybody. The Nightster ride to work. Someone asked in my Instagram feed quite sarcastically if you could ride it during the day, it being a Nightster and all. So here's proof that you can, just in case you were wondering. And normally we rev the bike up here, right? But again, it's got that anti-rev thing, right? See, I'm wide open. It just sits at a couple thousand RPM. Oh, I can actually check and see how many RPM it sits at. Let's go here. Clock. RPM. Wide open. At idle, it revs to, what is that, 2,900. And just sits there. It's not a hugely charismatic sounding engine, I don't think. It's like maybe a little tinny, but the performance and the sort of fun that lurks within is pretty undeniable, in my opinion. Okie dokie, time to answer some more Instagram queries. First one is from Arthur Aon, who asks, any idea why Harley canned the Bronx? The Bronx was a concept first shown with this 975cc RevMax engine in it, basically a naked sport bike looking thing. Harley decided not to build it, and everyone who likes regular motorcycles and not cruisers or touring bikes was disappointed. I am among them. Do you think it was in response to how well the Indian FTR performed? I assume you mean on showroom floors. I don't know the answer to this question. I don't know why the Bronx is no longer or will be no longer or whatever. But I have to say, you probably can gather this from my review thus far of this motorcycle. This engine would be perfect in that. I have to say, I feel like I can place myself in that Harley engineering room, and this engine had been tested and used, and they maybe like put it in a chassis and they rode it around a test facility at Harley-Davidson or something like that, and all the engineers were like, yeah, this is great. I mean, this basically feels like a 890 KTM Duke or whatever, you know, anything. And then the concept bike came out and people were like, well, hey, that's going to happen, and then it didn't happen. And now that I ride this engine in this bike, I think, yeah, that engine would be good. I can't help but think that. But I don't really have an answer for your question. I'll just cross my fingers that it'll still happen. Maybe Harley-Davidson brass will watch this review and they'll say, well, if Daily Rider said that we should put it in a Bronx, then we should do it. Fingers crossed, huh? Next question is from Bandita66, who asks, is this bike going to suffer the same fate as the previous generation Sportster, getting traded in after a short time for a more comfortable, bigger bike, or can it be made more practical / versatile like a Bonneville? Good question. Some of the things that the Nightster is pretty obviously not very good at could be fixed from comfort standpoint, that kind of thing. The platform certainly has potential to be more practical and versatile like a Bonneville. I just think that either the sort of like the look of it or the aura or the riding position or the like some aspect of the feel of the bike isn't going to lend itself quite as well as a Bonneville, just because a Bonneville is such a standard bike and has a little bit wider foundation on which to build the bike that you want, whereas this has a slightly narrower focus. But I do think that it's there. You can do it. I don't like, as far as technology and performance and stuff like that, it's all there. It can be done. And it would be a cool bike to do almost anything on. It'll just need a little bit more massaging than something like a Bonneville. Next question is from Joel Likeness, who asks, is this a legitimate, quote, first bike? I've heard that the power delivery may be a little strong for new riders. Yeah, I mean, you saw I've turned off traction control and I've hazed the rear tire leaving a stoplight. And I rode this thing in the rain, like I said, and it is a riot if you shut off traction control. Not that I would recommend that necessarily. It spins tire constantly. Yes, you could say that this is too much power for a new rider, but it's interesting that Harley's kind of like banking on people not being thrown off by that, right? It's the bottom of the range here. This is $11,999, which is a pretty high hurdle to get into a Harley-Davidson, but I think the last Sportster was at 11,250 or 11,300 or something like that for the old air-cooled Sportster, and this engine is just undeniably more powerful, more sophisticated, more modern. So you're getting a lot more, certainly. Does it have too much power for a brand new rider? Yes. But can you put it in rain mode and have it be pretty gosh darn mellow for what it is? Also, yes. I would love to see Harley have a lower step than this engine, but I don't know exactly what that looks like in 2024. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Next question is from Von Buzztoven, who says, regarding your past review of a Sportster 48 Special, which I did years and years ago, if both were in your garage, which one would you rather swing a leg over? An old 1200 Sportster 48 or a Nightster? Good question. This is at the core of my struggle with the Nightster. Is it a sport cruiser? Like, doesn't really lean over enough to be a sport cruiser, but like the engine is just so good. What do I want when I ride this bike? I gotta say, I think that if I was gonna choose between this bike and a 48, I think I would get a 48. I love the sort of like the World War II look and sound of it, which is it's a bit of an exaggeration, but like maybe I'm getting old and I just appreciate what a 48 represents. It's classic elemental Harley-Davidson. It's clattery and a little bit smelly and a little bit loud, but it's so evocative of what Harley-Davidson is and always has been in my mind. This is a battle that Harley-Davidson's fighting to try to step into the future while not denying the past. It's a tricky balance to strike, and I think that this bike delivers in a lot of ways, many of them ways that the 48 does not. I'm still a sucker for the old school, so I'd go 48. Last question here is from Patrick McKellips, who asks, there are many types of thunderstorms. What type of thunderstorm is this bike? Okay, we don't get a lot of thunderstorms here in California, but I'm an East Coast boy, so I should be able to answer this. Let's see here. What type of thunderstorm? I don't know what they're called. They're probably like cirrus thunderstorms and low pressure thunderstorms. I don't have any idea what I'm talking about, but here's what I have to say. When you're enjoying a nice summer day, you're having some lemonade or maybe a beer that you can see through. There's a nice breeze and you're hanging out in the backyard, and then the breeze kind of gets cool and the horizon gets dark and you're like, oh, that's interesting. And then not long afterward, there's wind whipping through and there's clouds snaking over the top of your house, and all of a sudden it's crashing this like freezing rain, pouring, and then 45 minutes later, blue sky again. No sign of clouds. Everything's great. Sort of like the tropical splash thunderstorm that rolls through. That's the type of thunderstorm that I think the Nightster is. It's refreshing and surprising, and you're maybe a little put off by it, or sort of like you're not sure you wanted it, but then once it happens, you're like, gosh, that was better than I was expecting. That's just the kind of storm that I wanted. I don't know if that helps, but but that's the sort of thunderstorm that I think the Nightster is, a refreshing one and different than you were expecting. Okay. Enough of me talking about weather. Let's get inside and put this sucker on the Daily Rider leaderboard.
Yeah. Okie dokie, everybody. Here we are inside RevZilla West at the Daily Rider leaderboard. You will notice I still haven't gotten I swear, it's like by the next episode, I can't promise, but I'm pretty sure we'll have a board topper over there. And I'll have my stuff together. Anyway, to the point, Harley-Davidson Nightster, ready to go on the board here. Of course, only one other bike on the board at this moment, the Kawasaki Z900 SE, which was covered as the first episode of 24. And the Nightster is, drum roll, not as good as a Kawasaki Z900 SE as a daily rider. Is it more approachable and a little bit like cooler? Maybe. I don't know. It's like, it's a matter of opinion. I'm not going to get into whether or not you like cruisers better than you like naked bikes or whatever. The Kawasaki Z900 is faster, has better brakes, handles better, I think objectively easier on your skeleton as you ride it. So it's my pick for being better as a daily rider. However, I will say one of the complaints that I leveled at the Z900 was the engine is sort of like good without being great, kinda. And the Nightster engine, while I did say that it doesn't arguably suit the Nightster style of motorcycle very well, it's like objectively great engine. And where I'm going with this, maybe some of you have already put this together. If you put that Nightster engine in a Z900 chassis, boy, you'd have something. It'd be might be a little weird. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But the kind of like punch and energy and vibe, if you will, that Nightster engine has is kind of like what the Z900 is missing, which is it's an odd couple. Anyway, but if we talk about the Nightster in the context of the 2023 board here, what other cruisers we got here? We got the Eliminator from Kawasaki. We got the Ducati Diavolo V4, and we got Honda Shadow Phantom, which is way down. That's a sad place for this Honda Shadow Phantom. It's a pretty good bike, but ratings is ratings. It's not as like the Kawasaki Eliminator, the Ducati Diavolo V4, great daily riders because of the kind of pizzazz they have, but also they're just the riding position being a little bit more conventional allows the balance of the chassis to be a little bit better, and it allows kind of like a little bit better comfort and maneuverability, I think, in general. So yeah, it wouldn't be super high up on the board in 23 there, but it is if nothing else, it is a new breed of Harley Sportster, and that's sort of what I promised early on, isn't it? Cool, glad we're agreed there. Well, I think that's just about all I can do for you. A couple little notes that just popped into my mind. Bike I rode is a 23 model technically, but it is black, and the 24 model also comes in black, and it is identical. I only really bring that up as a matter of fact that the lower price for 24 that I mentioned of $12,000 is for actually the gray bike, and the black one that I rode would be, I think, $12,400 or $12,300 or something like that. It's an extra few $100 for black paint as opposed to gray. I don't have any more information than that. Maybe you're as baffled as I am. Anywho, as we are in this transition period into 2024, I feel like it's worth noting the 23-24 price difference, even though there's no difference with the actual motorcycle itself. All right, well, that brings us to another episode conclusion. Thanks, as always, for hanging out. Buckle up for more bikes coming down the road in 2024. I hope you learned something. Hope you had fun. And I hope to see you next time on Daily Rider. Bye, everybody.
I don't understand why, when the blinker is on, turning left, if I hit it again, it shuts off. Why not just have it shut off when I press in the middle, which it also does? Then I don't know when my signal's on. It's not much of a problem. I don't... Turn signals are, the engineering's done. We figured it out. Left for left, right for right, push in the middle to cancel. That's all we need to know.